Did you know that when your orchid looks like this, it is not dead? I'm Tony Le-Britton and welcome to Plants with Impact, a series where I show you how to care for your houseplants so they don't only survive but thrive in your home. Many people think that when the orchid starts to drop its flowers, it's actually dying, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Just like other plants in our gardens, they flower for a short period, and then after that, they'll rest, recharge, and can rebloom for many years to come. Phalaenopsis orchids were first discovered in the 1700s, but didn't arrive into the UK until the 1800s, and after that, during Victorian times, became a huge orchid craze. You can see why. The flowers are magnificent and shaped like a moth, which gives it its name Phalaenopsis, which means moth-like. Phalaenopsis orchids are the #1 best-selling houseplant in the world, with tens of millions of them being produced year on year. Unfortunately, they're treated as cut flowers, so as soon as the flowers start to die, people tend to throw them out, but you don't need to. If you follow a couple of tips, you can get this to rebloom again and again. In fact, I've got one of these at home, which I've had blooming for 18 years. I was given it for my 16th birthday as a little treat, when Phalaenopsis orchids were actually a lot more rare than they are today. Getting your orchid to rebloom is really easy. You've just got to follow a couple of simple steps. The first thing to do is remove this cane. The canes are actually just used to transport the orchids so they don't get damaged. And if we take that out, we can see what we're working with. Wait until the flowers start to drop from the lower part of the stem. And I like to cut the stem as soon as the bottom flowers start to go over. This means you're keeping maximum energy in the plant itself, and it's not wasting the energy for the last few blooms. On the stem, you'll have nodes running right down the orchid. Follow that down to the very bottom and take some sharp snips and cut just below the last node. Some people do recommend to cut just below the flowering spike, and you may get a small flowering spike out here. I prefer to take the whole thing off, allow the plant to recover, and when it does reflower, you'll get larger, longer lasting blooms. The next thing to check is whether your orchid needs repotting. Take a little look at the roots. If the roots are filling the pot, then it's probably time to repot it. And it's also just a good time to have a look and check on the health of the roots, because that is what's going to result in a healthy plant. Repotting your orchid is super simple, but let's first take a little look at the roots. In this one pot, you can see some of the roots are hydrated and green, and some of the other roots are silver and dry. And we've also got a few of these dead roots at the bottom of the pot and also on the top, and we're going to cut those out to prevent any problems with rot down the line. So first things first, let's just tip the orchid out, give it a little gentle squeeze and pull it out of the pot. And you can see here some of the substrate has started to break down. Orchids grow naturally in the wild on trees, so they like a lot of airflow around the roots. And when the substrate is fine like this, it holds moisture, and as it has done here, can create some root rot. So we're going to tickle that off. You'll see in the middle here a little plug, and that's how the baby orchid was first grown and then repotted into this larger pot. It's actually important to take this off because that holds a lot of moisture around the bottom of the orchid. So just give it a wiggle and pull it out gently. If you do snap a couple of roots, it's absolutely fine. And now we can see exactly what we're working with. Most of the roots on this orchid are healthy, but there are some that we can snip off. What you want are thick, healthy roots, something like this here. And what you're looking for to remove are roots that feel flat or soft. And all you do is trace that back to where the root starts to look healthy again and snip it out. And we can work right across the orchid. These are the ones here, these crispy brown ones, these are the ones that were on the surface, and they will never hydrate again, so we can cut those out. Just work your way right through, removing any of these dead roots. So we'll clear all of this out the way and get ready to repot the orchid into some new, much better substrate. And for this, we'll get rid of this because we're not going to use it. This is the mix that I use. So this is 50% leca. So leca is an expanded clay. So inside here are thousands of tiny little channels which allow air to pass through, but hold on to moisture without sitting wet. And the other bit is a fine bark. So mixing these together creates the perfect atmosphere for your orchid. Phalaenopsis are epiphytic, which means they grow on trees, so they usually have a lot of airflow around the roots, which is why the pots have lots of holes and the mix we use is really open and airy. So we'll mix this together, about 50-50 of each. Take your pot, pop a little bit of the substrate in the base, and then just hold your orchid in place. Tuck the roots in. If there are any roots that are sticking out the top, no need to push them in. And then just gently fill around the orchid, turn the pot as you go, and tap just to allow that to drop down and around the roots. Once it's at the top, leave a little gap for watering, tap it down nicely, and then remember to water it really, really well. Once you've repotted your orchid, that's all you need to do. And now I'm going to tell you how to care for it, to keep it healthy and to get it to rebloom year after year. The most important thing for any plants is light, and orchids love bright light. And you may hear bright indirect and think that means to keep them out of direct sun. In fact, it's not necessarily true. If you can give your orchid bright direct light, either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, just avoiding that middle part where the sun is very intense, then it's going to really thrive. A north-facing windowsill is brilliant, or within a couple of meters of an east or west-facing window would be perfect. After lighting, the next thing to get right is watering. And you may remember earlier when I was showing you the silver and the green roots. You'll need to wait until all the roots look silver, and then your orchid is ready to be watered. And to water is really simple. You can do it two ways. I like to pop it in the display pot, fill that up with water, and then just leave your orchid to sit there for about 10 minutes. And after the 10 minutes, take it out of the display pot, give it a good shake out, tip away the excess, and then pop it back into this pot. The other way is just to simply put it under a running tap, flood it through really well, shake it out again, and allow it to drain off before you put it back. Orchids do not like to sit in water in a pot, so make sure that it's drained really well before you put it back in its display pot. Many people forget to fertilize their houseplants, and if you want your orchid to bloom again, it's really important to do it. So we use a balanced fertilizer, which is high in nitrogen and in phosphorus. Nitrogen is going to help with the leaf growth, and the phosphorus is going to help promote blooming. We feed every other watering, and you just put a scoop of this into your watering can and flush it through just like when you water your plant. The next watering, flush it through with clean water, and that's going to help prevent any buildup in the pot. If you're already following all of this advice and still can't get your orchids to bloom, pop them somewhere that has a drop in temperature at night. Because professionally, when we grow orchids to get them to bloom, we drop the temperature by about 10 degrees, and within a couple of weeks, you'll see a new flower spike emerging from between the leaves. When you do get your new flower spike, there's no need to use the cane to support it. Orchids will naturally drop down, arch over, and you'll get a beautiful cascade of blooms. Phalaenopsis orchids are tough plants, so if you don't get it all perfect, don't worry, it will still thrive. But remember, when it finishes flowering, it is not dead. Give it a little bit of care and you'll be able to keep this for years to come. And trust me, when you do get it to flower again, there is no better feeling.